Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is Shadow at Night for Monday, August the 18th, 2025. And on the show tonight, we have the Battle River Crowfoot by-election. The poll should be closing in another, what time we got here? 8 o'clock. So an hour and a half. If you're in that riding and you haven't voted yet, get your ass down to a polling station and make a vote. Now, we're going to reveal exactly what the ballot looks like in just a second, and the very long list of candidates, 214, 216 or something like that, thanks to the longest ballot committee. Apparently what they're doing is illegal, but Elections Canada has done nothing to stop them, nor has the federal government. Legal election interference. So, yeah, we're going to give you the rundown in just a second on that. Also, the flight attendants for Air Canada, the ones that went on strike over the weekend after, 7 or 8 months of negotiating with the airline in good faith, both sides, apparently. They just couldn't come to an agreement. Well, the government stepped in over the weekend. Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu, the one who was taking all those flights during COVID, even though you weren't supposed to do that stuff. So she came in and said, well, we're going to legislate them back to work orders. And then the union responded earlier today, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Also, Doug Ford can't seem to keep his big mouth shut for some reason when it comes to talking about Donald Trump. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a bigger case of TDS. Of course, that's Trump derangement syndrome. And it does us absolutely no good in negotiations with the United States, considering we're one of the only countries that doesn't have a deal with them. You would think that Mark Carney would take this. I was going to call him a name, but I'm trying to be professional here. And by the way, I've been ill these last couple of days, so if I don't seem quite on tonight, that's the reason. As a matter of fact, This is the first time I think I've actually spoken in 2 or 3 days. I was out on Friday night having a good time with friends, and then Saturday morning, and since then I don't think I've talked. So yeah, I may not seem to have the energy that I normally have tonight, and if I don't, that's the reason why. Where was I? Oh yeah, Doug Ford, TDS, Trump. Does he think that Trump doesn't see that stuff? Not that Trump sits and watches Canadian media. Like, oh, they said that. He's probably got a guy who sits and does that for him. And then at the end of the day, he says, oh, by the way, President Trump, this guy said this guy this guy this guy this guy this, and here's the clips of it. And then Trump might watch them. He might not. And if he does, he's going to see this. Once again, I was going to call a name, but I won't. I'll take the high road. He sees this guy, this premier, insulting him on national television. Why on earth? Now, it doesn't take a massive ego for somebody to go, I don't think I like that guy too much. And based upon that, I don't think I want to do a deal. I don't have any real big sense of urgency to do a deal with these guys. Considering that he can probably get what he got from us from other places. And who knows what's going on with Putin right now. I think Russia's got every single natural resource Canada has, maybe times 2 or 3. So maybe he struck a deal with Putin over the weekend when they met in Alaska to come up with some natural resources, some rare earth. Who knows what happens behind closed doors? And who knows what's going to happen with Ukraine going forward? We don't know. Anyway, all this stuff is coming up. All this stuff is coming up in just a second. Hello, Heather, watching in Edmonton on YouTube. Same with Wayne and Patty, watching on some guy called Ray's YouTube account. How does that work? Anyway, Wayne and Patty are watching tonight. Regina's watching in Surprise, Arizona. Hello, Frank in Huntsville, Muskoka area. Debbie's watching in Kipling. Hello, Terry in Grand Prairie. Darcy is watching on X in the Yukon. In Whitehorse, Tracy is watching in Gilbert, Arizona. Amanda watching tonight from Ontario. Hello, Shano Vision, the only viewer we have on Twitch. Kev is watching tonight on Facebook, as is Sophie and John. Reed is watching on X tonight from Woodbridge. Hello, Edna, Eddie, Sandra, Cheryl, Barb, Dave, Shelley, Michael, Carrie, Dodie Ann, Stephanie, Iris, Kim. And tonight on the extension, why can't we talk about it? It's a film produced in Canada about 3 months ago. I hadn't heard of until this morning, and I thought we'd sit down, we'd watch it, and we'd find out why we can't talk about these things, how government regulations, mandates, or even just statements can affect us at the societal level, the community level, the family level. Yeah. So no matter what platform you're watching on tonight, no matter where you're watching from, guys, I urge you to get this out there, like and share, get as many ears and eyes on this as you possibly can. The show begins in 30 seconds. Hello to my Shadow at Night community on Telegram as well. I'll see you guys for the extension in, I'm not sure exactly, probably about an hour or so, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. Okay, let's go to Elections Canada, because again, that big by-election's happening at Battle River Crowfoot in Alberta today. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, is trying to get a seat back in the House of Commons for the fall session, which begins next month. Grant Abraham tops the bill, and the reason for that is all of these people are listed alphabetically, all 214 or 16 of them. So here they are. And by the way, everybody who goes to vote or went to vote today was provided with a very large print list of all the candidates. So you got to find the one you want to vote for and then write in the name and the party. That's how it works according to Elections Canada. But look at this. There's Grant Abraham. We had him on the show last Wednesday night. He had a lot of great things to say. In case you haven't seen that episode, go back and find it, watch it. So Grant Abraham, and then Independent. These are all people from the longest ballot committee who never campaigned, or maybe didn't even sign their own names to the nomination papers. There they all are there. And then there's a People's Party candidate, Jonathan Bridges, and then Independent. More independent, a centrist party, I guess. Ahmed Hassan is the candidate for that. The Marijuana Party. What do you guys got to lobby for anymore? Come on, man. The Marijuana Party. Elsie Kipp, man. She's the candidate for the Marijuana Party. Green Party is Ashley McDonald. Independent. Conservative. Oh, there's Pierre. There's Pierre Poilievre there. Now, in the last election, the Conservatives won by, I think it was 83%. Not 83%. They didn't win by that. They got 83% of the vote over all the other candidates. There weren't 215 on the ballot during the federal election, not in that riding. But they won with 83% of the vote, something like that. So if Poilievre wins with anything less than 70%, you know the Liberals and the NDP are going to call it a loss. They're going to call it a loss. So how do I use this adapted ballot anyway? Well, simply write the name of your candidate in. And everybody, like I said, all the voters were provided with a very huge print list of all of the candidates. So it could be this thick. So where is my candidate? I don't know where my candidate is. So you put the candidate's name and the political affiliation on the ballot. Never seen anything like this in all the years I've been voting. Usually it's an X marks the spot, and then you move on. You fold it up, you put it in the thing, and then you move on. But no, you got to write the name of the candidate in on the ballot this time, along with their political party, their political affiliation. And by the way, the Commissioner of Elections Canada said today that they're going to start the counting process because there's already like 14,000 mail-in ballots that were cast before today. They're going to start the counting process before the polls close tonight. So it's quite possible we could have a winner declared before the show even goes off the air tonight. Now, the next thing, Doug Ford, according to left-wing corporate CTV, said today that Pierre Poilievre should put partisan stripes aside and work with Mark Carney amid the Trump threat. Still going with that Trump threat thing. Here is Mark Carney talking to reporters earlier this morning.
Trade talks are going. How are they going?
Good morning. Bonjour.
How are trade talks going?
Well, actually, I'm just going to meet with Minister LeBlanc. We'll have a discussion of that and important discussion with Premier Ford this morning on a variety of aspects for the Ontario economy, the Canadian economy, which of course includes trade, but goes much more to the issues that we can control and how we build out from within.
Like what would some examples be?
Well, we'll talk about the housing sector. We'll talk about steel, auto, new sectors of the economy, including artificial intelligence. What we're doing in terms of making Canada competitive.
What's your advice to President Zelensky regarding should he accept any deal?
I gave that advice yesterday in a meeting with President Zelensky and the coalition.
And what was it?
Do you have any comment on Air Canada, sir? Anything to say to Air Canada union workers?
Oh, by the way, before we get into the Air Canada union workers, he calls this the coalition of the willing, which goes back to George W. Bush, recall? The Iraq War. The coalition of the willing.
I'll say the following. We recognize very much the critical role that flight attendants play in keeping Canadians and their families safe as they travel, comfortable as they travel. And it's important that they're compensated equitably at all times, fairly at all times. That's the reason why there have been negotiations over the course of the last 8 months. It is disappointing that those negotiations did not come to an agreement, and it was the judgment of both the union and the company that they were at an impasse. That's not my judgment, it's their judgment. And so we are in a situation where literally hundreds of thousands of Canadians and visitors to our country are being disrupted by this action. I urge both parties to resolve this as quickly as possible, and the minister will have more to say. Minister Hajdu will have more to say later.
Did the government make a mistake imposing binding arbitration on the weekend?
Notice he didn't talk about that. He didn't talk about Hajdu ordering the flight attendants back to work. He didn't mention it whatsoever. Why? Because they're not listening. We're going to get into that. Here is Doug Ford's comments with reporters, or here are Doug Ford's comments with reporters this morning.
Donald Trump is so unpredictable. I don't even know if he knows what he's doing tomorrow morning. So let's start focusing on.
You see what I mean with this guy? Like, it's the first thing out of his mouth. Donald Trump, I think he knows what he's doing tomorrow morning. Shut up. Don't you think the Carney should take this guy aside and say, Doug, I appreciate your passion. And this is the diplomatic approach. I appreciate your passion. I do. But shut the up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
Creating that environment.
But is there an
to attract
acceptance?
companies.
Is there an acceptance, I guess, from leaders
Well,
that we'll just have the tariffs?
Again, he's the prime minister will speak on that, but the president is unpredictable. He'll come out with some cockamamie thing tomorrow
Shut up.
that we don't even know about.
So
right?
do you think that Mark Carney is being too elbows down in
Not
response
at
to that
all.
unpredictability?
Not at all. He's doing an incredible job. He's working collaboratively with 12 other premiers and myself, and working as Team Canada. And he's doing a very, very good job, in my opinion. Put in his position, dealing with Donald Trump. Let's stop worrying about Donald Trump. We'll start focusing on Ontario and Canada and all the other provinces. And
Premier, today is Pierre Poilievre's by-election. If he gets elected, I'm wondering, what's your advice to him going into the fall sitting of the Parliament?
work with the Prime Minister.
How so?
It was Team Canada. You know.
Would you have plans to meet with Poilievre to push that message?
Wait a minute. What part of His Majesty's loyal opposition does this guy not get? Now, I understand as the opposition, it's your job to scrutinize everything the government does. You don't have to oppose everything, but you do have to scrutinize everything. And if there's something that doesn't make sense, which happens quite often with these liberals, then you have to call them out on it. And if their strategy is not working, and it hasn't so far, no deal, then you have to call them out on that too. But instead, this walrus, you know what? I was trying so hard to not call a name. This guy says, work with the Prime Minister. And it sounds like work with him no matter what. Team Canada, unified. And he's saying all 12 premiers, or 13 of them, they're all unified in this. No, they're not. They've all got very different ideas. Well, not all of them, but some of them, many of them have got very different ideas about what should be done, notably Danielle Smith, who's been down there negotiating with Trump on Alberta's behalf without Mark Carney or any federal representation around at all. So let's finish off what this goof had to say.
To make sure that he is working with the Prime Minister?
All I want to do is move forward collectively as a government. I don't care about political stripes. The person I'm working with right now is the Prime Minister of the day. And as far as I'm concerned, he's doing a really, really good job considering the position he's been put in. I challenge anyone try to deal with Donald Trump, myself included. He's a different type of cat. But we're united. We know what we need to do.
You just said that Donald Trump is incredibly unpredictable. And based upon those words, how can you know what you need to do? If he's going to throw you a curveball in the dirt when it should be a fastball down the middle, are you prepared for that? We know what we need to do. I don't think you do. Shut up. That's step one. Shut up. You don't have to be a fragile egoed tyrant to take offense to words like that. I mean, it seems like that's all he could talk about. Trump. Unpredictable. Wild-eyed, crazy, nuts. He doesn't know what he's doing from one day to the next. Dude, that's not helping. That's not helping. All right, let's get. Oh, I knew I forgot something. Sean Foyt is coming back to Canada for the second half of his tour. And he's got a new Winnipeg. Well, it's not really a Winnipeg location, but remember, all these cities across the country have pulled his permits because they think he's dangerous. They think a man going across the country singing Praise Jesus is dangerous. And so the city of Winnipeg pulled his permit, and now he's going to be playing just south of a city called Steinbach. This is about, I'm going to say 45 minutes to an hour southeast of the city of Winnipeg. And this is going to be on Wednesday evening from 6 till 8. So I may head down there myself and broadcast this thing live. And if that's the case, there won't be a regular show that night. It'll be on from 6 until 8 o'clock. So 38109 Evergreen Road in Freudenfeld, Manitoba. So if you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the city, if you're in the area, if you're within an hour and a half, 2 hours, that's the place you want to be for a little bit of Revive in 25 with Sean Foyt on Wednesday night in Manitoba. There it is right there. 38109 Evergreen Road, Freudenfeld, Manitoba, from 6 until 8 o'clock. That's our buddy Mel's place, and he's hosted events like this before, so it's not going to be just some haphazard thing. It will be laid out pretty well. Parking and toilets and all of that stuff. So, and you know, in case all the toilets are occupied, there's going to be plenty of room to go in the woods. The largest gender-neutral bathroom on the planet. So we may see you guys on Wednesday night. Okay, so here we go with the Air Canada flight attendants from left-wing corporate global news. The federal government intervening to resolve this labor dispute between Air Canada and the union representing the carrier's 10,000 flight attendants on the first day of their strike. This was Saturday. Patty Hajdu is the jobs minister. She announced the order for binding arbitration and for operations to resume. She ordered them back to work. Here is Mario for the North with his thoughts on it.
The Liberal Minister of Jobs just ordered the flight attendants to get back to work and for Air Canada to resume operations. Now, this is good news for potential Canadians who would have been stranded overseas, but extremely bad news for the flight attendants who are simply looking to get paid for the work that they do before the airplane takes off. Now, here's the reality of the situation. The Liberals ordering them to go back to work weakens their negotiation position, period. There's no question about this. One of the strongest tools that unions and people have is to strike. The Liberal Party just kneecapped them and told them to go back to work. Did you know that nearly 100% of the 10,000 flight attendants voted for the strike? To be exact, it was 99.7%. 99.7% of all flight attendants thought this was necessary in order for them to get compensated fairly. Did you also know that a junior full-time flight attendant earns $1,950, I believe, $2 per month as a full-time employee before taxes? As a full-time staff member, that nets out to roughly $12 per hour. So when the Liberal Minister of Jobs, Patty, orders everyone to get back to work, it's a win for corporate interests, period. Especially when flight attendants are simply asking for the most basic right to get paid for the work that they do.
Yeah. Okay. So Mario is on the side of the nurses, not nurses, the flight attendants. And I say, yeah, great, whatever. Take a side. I don't care. To me, this whole thing is not about what you're getting paid or what your working conditions are or whatever. Because I don't have a horse in that race. To me, this is about the union standing up to the government and once again overreaching. That's what they're doing. They're overreaching. So the union has said, I'm sorry, but we're not going back to work. So what's the government going to do now? We're going to get to that. the meantime, Air Canada has announced they will suspend all flights through tomorrow afternoon after flight attendants still defy a federal back-to-work order. The airline CEO told CTV News earlier today he hoped Air Canada would resume services tomorrow. CUPE has not called off its strike, a move that Air Canada says, well, that's illegal because the government said you have to get back to work. So now they're going to try and paint it like these are a bunch of wildcatters. These are a bunch of people. They're hooligans. They're like the convoy freedom protesters. Ooh, that's what they're going to try to do, but they better walk carefully, man. They had better walk very carefully on this because the president of CUPE, the one that's handling this particular situation, says if it means folks like me going to jail, then so be it, because these rights have to mean something. The right to strike. The company has asked travelers not to go to the airport unless they have a ticket with another airline. So they're saying, no, we're not listening to you. What is the government going to do? Are they going to walk onto the picket lines with 500 police officers and arrest them all? Are they going to go after the leadership? Or are they going to back down and do nothing? Maybe they'll freeze their bank accounts. That's a very, very good point, Royce. Thank you for that. Yeah. Let's freeze a few bank accounts and see what happens. Now, this is interesting because if they try something, if they try the tactics that they employed with the Freedom Convoy, it's going to be a different result this time. Why? Because they're dealing with a union, one of the biggest, baddest unions out there. It's CUPE. And they are supported by all of the other unions and all of the other locals of CUPE. You see, it was easy to go for the Freedom Convoy protesters because they're all atomized, out there, spread out, not connected in any real way. I mean, maybe emotionally, but other than that, no organization, even though the government wanted everybody to believe that they were a subversive group that had been together for years and years and years, this far right-wing knuckle-dragging group that were all a bunch of Nazis, fascists. That wasn't the case at all. And so it was far more difficult for the Freedom Convoy protesters to fight off the government than it will be for members of CUPE. Remember, they are supported. And this is why it's very important. This is what Daniel Tyree of the DominionSociety.ca said the other night. It's our intention to bring freedom-minded, logical Canadians, common sense Canadians together under one umbrella so that we can stand up against this tyranny. We have to. And more importantly, if we want to fight back against this stuff, we're going to have to pick a lane. And I know it sounds difficult. What lane do we pick? There's so many different lanes to choose from. But we're going to have to pick one thing, and we're going to have to fight for that. Excuse me. And if that means abandoning everything else, or at least paying far less attention to everything else, then that's what we're going to have to do. And we have to get together and decide what that lane is. And once we win that, then we can move forward. Because you can bet this flight attendant strike is not going to last all that long. The government's going to back down because they understand it's political suicide for them to continue on this. But can these union members be penalized? CTV asked today. And here's what we got. The Canadian Industrial Relations Board ordered union leaders today to direct their members back to work to end this unlawful strike of more than 10,000 flight attendants. 10,000 of them. Good luck with that. The flight attendants walked off the job Saturday after failing to reach a new contract agreement over unpaid work and what it called poverty wages. Sandeep Gokhale, employment and labor lawyer and partner at Sherrard Coos LLP, told CTV today the decision to declare the strike illegal was not surprising since the directive by federal jobs minister Patty Hajdu Saturday was clear. Hajdu asked the CIRB to impose binding arbitration and order an end to the job action through Section 107 of the Labor Code. And keep in mind that the government has done this quite a bit lately. And it's getting kind of old because you take away that right to strike. You can bet those blue collars are going to have something to say about it, considering that Labor Day is coming up. Wouldn't that be hilarious if this strike and then 3 or 4 other strikes, major strikes started through the Labor Day weekend? So CUPE is challenging the CIRB order in federal court. Flight attendants are continuing the strike, which the airline says has resulted in an estimated 500,000 customers' flights being canceled as of today. Cockale says there's precedent going back to the 70s when union leaders were jailed as a result of similar conduct. I'm not sure we're going to see that here, he said, noting it may depend on the union's response as it argues the back-to-work order is unconstitutional. He said it was surprising to see the amount of defiance in these workers. We haven't seen this type of defiance in quite some time in terms of an outright refusal, despite government orders as well in legal decisions requiring employees to go back to work. Well, that's what happens when you've got a government that just thinks they can do whatever they want. Eventually, somebody somewhere is going to call them out. Now, what's it going to mean? I don't know. Are they going to back down from any further action like this for a while, let things cool down, or are they going to just keep it up? Like what they're doing with the ostrich farm in BC, which is still a federal thing, by the way, and there's still no decision on that at all, even though the appeals case was heard, about a month and a half ago now. This news came out on Friday. I think John Carpay of the Justice Center talked about it on this show a couple of weeks ago. BC nurse gets suspension and fine for comments about transgender people. All of the left-wing corporate media picked this story up on Friday afternoon. Let me make this big so we can all see here, or bigger. Cling, cling, cling. There we go. A BC nurse has been suspended and fined, get this one, nearly $94,000. For making discriminatory and derogatory statements about transgender people. Transgender people. Like anything like that even exists. Okay, it exists naturally in about 0.00002% of the population. Other than that, it's a mental condition. The BC College of Nurses and Midwives says a disciplinary panel has issued a decision against Amy Ham. We're going to try and get Amy on the air here. Suspending her for 1 month while also ordering her to pay the college costs and disbursements within 2 years. The panel said in its verdict in March that Ham committed professional misconduct for making statements across various online platforms between July of 2018 and March of 2021 that were partly designed to elicit fear, contempt, and outrage against members of the transgender community. I shouldn't laugh, but this is absolutely outrageous. This is unacceptable. The college says Ham has filed an appeal of the discipline order in BC Supreme Court. The decision on penalty and costs is stayed until that appeal has been resolved. So the Justice Center says in a release that Ham was penalized for her statements defending the right of women to access female-only spaces. The release says Ham had worked in healthcare for more than 13 years, has been promoted to a nurse educator. Lisa Bildy is Ham's lawyer, says in a statement that they believe the panel made legal and factual errors in reaching this decision, which penalizes the nurse for expressing mainstream views aligned with science and common sense. And yet, so many people are so terrified to speak up and say anything about this. I'll tell you what, if they do, or if they ever did, this whole thing would go away. Just like climate change. It would just go away. We have something coming up about climate change in just a little bit here. Ooh, what happened here? Oh, okay. You guys still got me, I'm hoping. We just had a bit of a power bump here. Another 41 unmarked graves detected at BC residential school site, First Nations say. Of course, they can't show us any evidence of it at all. Hang on here. I've got a video that's going to go along with this. It's actually kind of funny. There it is there. All right. An 18-month investigation at a former residential school site in BC's Sunshine Coast has found more evidence of children who disappeared there, the area's First Nation says. The Shisai First Nation in Sechelt said in a release Friday that 41 additional unmarked graves had been found as a result of a search with ground-penetrating radar in the area around St. Augustine's residential school site. Once again, they're going with this ground-penetrating radar narrative. It said the discovery brought the number of suspected graves at the site to 81 after initial findings announced in 2023. This is absolutely outrageous. I think that these Indian bands who are perpetrating this nonsense should be sued for fraud or charged with fraud, because that's what this is. Until they prove it, it's fraud. And any news agency that perpetrates this, and this, by the way, was a Canadian press story, so they all picked it up, they should be fined as well and censured for this kind of irresponsible reporting. It is incredibly irresponsible of them until they go and they check the site for themselves and they find proof, and they could sit back and they could say, well, we're only reporting on what they're saying. Well, how is that news unless they have actual proof of what they're saying? It's not anything. So you are trying to spin a story and fool the Canadian public yet again. That is yellow journalism at its worst. Now, I don't know who this guy is. Somebody sent this to me a couple of days ago, and I thought it was funny. I don't know who he is, like I said. But apparently he was, what does he call it? Misindiginated 3 times today.
Guys, I can't believe I'm even having to get on here and say this, but I've already been misindiginated 3 times today. I decided to go see the local shaman because I wanted to talk to some of my ancestors. And when I got there, he kind of just looks at me and he's like, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." And I explained to him that I was assigned white American and the name Josh at birth, but I identify as trans Indigenous and I go by Walking Tomahawk now. And he was like, "Wait, so you're not a real Native American?" And I said, "Excuse me, bigot? Real Native American?" And it's like, how do these people not know that trans Indigenous Native Americans are Indigenous Native Americans? And this land is just as much our land as it is theirs. Like, I shouldn't even have to explain this to these transphobes. It's like, I honestly feel like Native American identified white men are some of the most underrepresented and underappreciated people in this country. So I never got to talk to my relatives. I just left because I was so upset.
Misindiginated 3 times. That's an outrage. You guys know who Dr. Kathleen Ruddy is? Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. I know that Dr. Makis has been, he's been pretty prolific lately. Let's just say that, on his Substack. And now he suggests that the Western Standard has joined Danielle Smith's war on Alberta cancer patients with a fraudulent hit piece. He's calling them a big pharma asset. The Western Standard. This is very interesting. So this is the story from the Western Standard that Dr. Makis puts down. And I want to say at this stage of the game here that I cannot verify what either one of these parties is saying as true. What I can say is that they both have very strong opinions, and all of this needs to be litigated. In my opinion, this all needs to be litigated fairly. But we know that certain elements have, let's just say, usurped the fairness and good judgment of Canada's institutions, like the College of Physicians and Surgeons in every province. And the one in Alberta is asking the Court of King's Bench to issue an injunction preventing Willem Makis, William, from providing health services or using medical titles in the province, alleging he's continued to practice without a license for more than 6 years. Now, he did say on X a couple of days ago that he can no longer treat patients in Alberta. He was terribly sorry in having to say that, but he can know, and he's not treating patients directly. That's something else that we really need to stipulate here. He has been advising. Dr. Makis, whose license was canceled over regulatory noncompliance, has publicly denied wrongdoing and has repeatedly accused CPSA, AHS, and Danielle Smith's government of targeting him and terminally ill cancer patients. In a recent post on X, he claimed the Premier's government was rushing to criminalize ivermectin, framing the legal action as an attack on stage 4 cancer patients. Now, we have heard some of the wonders that ivermectin can apparently do for this condition. Again, it still needs to go through a lot of testing. But let's continue with this article from Western Standard. Makis said to all remaining Danielle Smith supporters, attacking my terminally ill stage 4 cancer patients is evil. And doing so makes you the worst and most evil individuals in Canada. Far worse than the elbows up liberals who were destroying the country. He went on to say in a news release that he was standing firm against what he described as an unlawful campaign by the CPSA to silence and discredit him. In an affidavit obtained by Western Standard, filed July 16th, CPSA Registrar and CEO Dr. Scott McLeod says Makis, whose Alberta medical license was canceled in February of 2019, has repeatedly presented himself to the public as a physician while offering cancer consultations and promoting the use of ivermectin as an alternative treatment. Alarmingly, in one post, he says that he runs the world's largest ivermectin cancer clinic and sees thousands of patients from around the world, the affidavit stated. In Canada, ivermectin must be prescribed by a regulated health professional and dispensed by a pharmacist. According to CPSA records, Makis was first licensed in Alberta in 2013 in the specialty of nuclear medicine and worked at the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton until 2016. He faced workplace complaints in 2015 and 2017, and in 2018, a CPSA hearing tribunal found him guilty of unprofessional conduct for threatening a former colleague. Now, we've heard Dr. Makis claim that is absolutely bogus on this show. The tribunal ordered him to undergo a fitness to practice assessment, but CPSA says he never complied. His license was later canceled for non-payment of fees and failure to meet regulatory requirements. We've become increasingly concerned by reports that Makis is presenting himself as a doctor in relation to the practice of medicine and providing medical opinions, advice, and consultations, the affidavit said. The affidavit goes on to state that in October of 2016, Makis commenced an action against AHS in the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench in connection with the termination of his contract. Makis subsequently amended his claim to add CPSA as a defendant, alleging, among other things, that CPSA conspired with AHS to prevent him from returning to practice at CCI and to prevent him from obtaining a medical license outside of Alberta. Let's keep in mind that during these years, the NDP was in charge in Alberta, and they corrupted that province badly, even worse than it already was with the previous PC governments. That claim was dismissed in April of 2023. Despite his unlicensed status, CPSA alleges Makis has continued to advertise and provide medical services, prompting a cease and desist letter in February of this year. The regulator says he ignored the order, continued his activities with inquiries about his services coming from both health professionals and patients. In an official statement, the CPSA said, using the title of doctor or MD in relation to providing medical care without an active license means there are no regulatory safeguards to ensure patients are receiving safe care. It is dangerous and can lead. I find this hilarious considering how many doctors were willing to push that nonsense, that mRNA nonsense not so long ago. Remember that? Of course you do. It's dangerous and can lead to misdiagnoses, incorrect treatments, and serious physical and or financial harm to patients. If a patient is harmed by someone not licensed to practice medicine, there is no regulatory accountability for the unlicensed person who caused the harm. Makis countered, saying this dispute was not about public safety, but about silencing independent voices, punishing dissent, and stretching CPSA's authority far beyond the law. He went on to allege the CPSA is acting beyond its authority, citing old closed complaints while refusing to identify accusers or show any evidence of harm. Makis believes the CPSA's case rests on unsubstantiated claims that offering consultations or running a clinic amounts to practicing medicine without a license. The Alberta government confirmed Thursday it's not introducing legislation to criminalize the use of ivermectin, dismissing Makis's claims. Alberta's government and the premier are not introducing legislation that would criminalize the use of ivermectin. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Primary and Preventative Health Services told the Western Standard, "Our understanding from the CPSA is that William Makis has not held a license to practice medicine since 2019 due to non-payment, and that he has not attempted to renew his license." Dr. Makis's take on this: the Western Standard never contacted me for comment. Western Standard has joined the war on Alberta cancer patients and gave a one-sided story from the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and its top pedophile leader, Scott McLeod, who attacked ivermectin for COVID-19 in 2021, fired all unvaccinated CPSA employees and reinstated medical licenses of two child, you can see it there, can't you? RAPISTS, who were distributing child porn in Alberta, Fred Janke, Ghassan Al-Naimi, and protected other child sex abusers, Albert de Villers. You don't hate these people enough. So what about it? Does ivermectin work? It's still far too early to say. There are clinical trials going on. Ivermectin in relation to how cancer responds to it. So there's this doctor. Her name is Dr. Kathleen Ruddy. There she is there. She's a member of Elevate. She is a breast cancer surgeon who's been caring for patients for the last 20 years. And she was interviewed by the Epoch Times not so long ago. And here is, and again, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up about cancer. I know that Mel Gibson said some things on Joe Rogan a few months back, and there has been a lot of talk about this. And Dr. Ruddy, a breast cancer surgeon for years, is about to tell you some pretty crazy stuff too. Watch.
I was as astonished as anyone might be that ivermectin has potential as an anti-cancer agent. I'm a cancer surgeon. We don't do parasites, okay? We don't do ivermectin. And I was not really even familiar with those people who use ivermectin. And so when, in the early days of COVID, when it became clear that ivermectin was effective in preventing and treating patients with a SARS-CoV-2 infection, I began to be aware, having looked in the literature, that there was 20 years of research showing that ivermectin had great potential in the treatment of cancer. I was introduced to a patient with stage 4 prostate cancer. Had received 2 vaccines, perfectly healthy, marathoner, no history of cancer in the family. 2 months after his second Pfizer shot, he works for the government. He's going to lose his job and his pension if he wasn't vaccinated. He was diagnosed all at once with stage 4 prostate cancer. He tells a very compelling story, melodramatic story about that 24-hour period of time in his life. And he went through the traditional protocols: radiation, chemotherapy, pharmacologic castration, all of it, over a period of 9 months. And then his doctor said, you know, there's really nothing else we can do. And his name is Paul Mann, and he was like, can't you give me more radiation? No. Can't you give me more chemo? No. Aren't there any other drugs? No. Are there any clinical trials? There's nothing. Hospice. send for the priest. So a friend of his knew me, and she said, would you give Paul a call? He just needs some moral support, something. So I said, sure. So I began calling him. We spoke about once a week for 3 weeks, and finally, the poor guy was suffering, had cancer in 11 bones in his body. His right leg was completely swollen, obstructed with tumor. He's miserable. And I said, Paul, I don't know if this is going to help you, but I know it's not going to hurt you. I just can't imagine, based on my judgment and understanding of the scientific literature and all of the work that Drs. Corey and Merrick had done, and others around the world, that ivermectin would hurt you. It might help. I can't say. So he said, I'll give it a try. And he drove to Tennessee, where you could get it without a prescription. P.S. I discovered last night, having dinner with Paul and his wife, Terry, he drove from where he lives in Missouri to Tennessee and paid cash for his ivermectin. That's it. He didn't submit it to an insurance company. He didn't tell anybody back in Missouri, his oncologist. No. His ivermectin prescriptions are listed in his chart. How did that information get from the pharmacy in Tennessee to his chart in Missouri? We don't know. Somebody does. I'd like to know myself. Anyway, he starts taking ivermectin, and he doesn't have any problems with it. And I talk to him every week. And how are you feeling? Well, no change. Next week, maybe a little bit better. I don't know. How's your leg? It's not quite as swollen. How's the pain? Pain everywhere. Maybe a little bit better. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Not getting worse. Not necessarily getting better, not getting worse. Fast forward. 2-month follow-up appointment at the clinic. They didn't expect to see him. Okay, he's like, Paul. He's feeling a little bit better. They do PSA, which was off the charts to begin with. And if I'm not mistaken, at the time they randomized him to hospice, I think it was in the hundreds. Okay, he goes back for his 2-month appointment. It's 1.3. They said, you're in remission. Well, not, complete remission. He still had the bone mets, but you're in like a biochemical remission. Well, that was good news. Slowly, 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 he begins to improve. Less pain, swelling is okay. A lot of other vaccine injuries, however, he's getting better. He's getting better. We're giving him nutritional support and other supplements. He's having TIAs, little mini strokes. But he didn't tell me about that because we were talking about the cancer. But over a period of time, I'm asking him questions. And I said, oh, you're having TIAs? His wife said, yeah, having TIAs. I said, what did the cancer doctors tell you? Because that's who he's seeing. They say it's not related to my cancer. It's like, so I get a call from his wife one evening. He's in the emergency room. He's had this TIA, whatever it is, catastrophic. And I said, Paul, what are they doing for you? And he said, well, they did a CAT scan of my head, and they said they don't see anything specific. It's a TIA, and it's not related to my cancer. They send him home. I said, did they do anything? No. I said, well, okay, call me crazy. I'm a cancer surgeon, but I think you need to see a cardiologist. I think there are things they can do, okay? And of course, I look it up really quickly, and of course there are things. So get him to the cardiologist, get him on blood thinners, no more problems with TIAs, okay? That's an indictment of the healthcare system. So he's getting better. About 9 months later, he's out dancing for 4 hours, 3 nights a week. He gets a head-to-toe rescanning, and 3 of the bone mets are gone. There's no growth of the mets that are there, no new lesions. There's only one hot spot, and that's where he received radiation therapy, and the radiologist really could not distinguish whether that was a tumor hot spot or radiation change. He is doing very well. Now, the vaccine injury is a problem, but the cancer is no longer a problem, except for the fact that it's still there, and we want to get rid of it completely. And he said, he called me from a hockey game, and he said, if I didn't know I have cancer, I would not know I have cancer. That was patient number one. I was like, that's interesting. A second patient crossed my path. A guy in his 70s who had been losing weight for a year and a half, 40 pounds, not vaccinated, 40-pound weight loss, smoker, drinker, all he does is fish. And he could no longer swallow, and he could hardly talk. And so I got on the phone with him, and I said, Eddie, tell me a little bit about your history and so forth. He knew someone with prostate cancer who had taken ivermectin, had cured himself from prostate cancer with that. So Eddie began taking ivermectin. I have no idea what the dosing was. He was just taking it. And I gave him some advice about diet and, try and get the weight back on and so on and so forth. Within a couple of weeks, he sounded stronger. Sounded stronger. He could swallow. He had gained 6 pounds. His voice was better. Followed him for the next couple of weeks, maybe another month or so, and I said, Eddie, we need to get a scan. He doesn't have insurance, he doesn't like doctors, whatever. He had been diagnosed in that interval with 2 esophageal tumors, unresectable. Surgeons wouldn't go near it. The doctor said, well, we'll give you chemo and radiation, and Eddie said, no, you're not. So he takes his ivermectin, maybe about 6 weeks later. I said, Eddie, you need to get a scan. I had to argue with Eddie to get a scan. We got the scan. No tumors. Gone. Gone.
So what's AHS really doing with Dr. Makis in Alberta? Is it about licensing? My personal opinion is no. Pharmaceutical companies. The cancer industry. If this actually came out, if ivermectin is in fact that wonder drug for cancer, and this came out, that industry would die. Now, how many people work for cancer-related companies, industries? Cancer care, cancer hospice, cancer this, cancer that, the cancer fundraisers every single year. How many of them are there? There are countless runs, golf tournaments, you name it. Cancer. They don't want a cure for it. Are you kidding? It is an industry, a $1 billion industry. And pharmaceutical makes billions and billions of dollars off it. If a cure were to come out, a cheap one that nobody can copyright, that's it. So what are they really doing to Dr. Makis anyway? And what was COVID? What was it? I believe that aside from the control factor and all of that, we all know, it was an attempt to create another one of these industries like cancer. Now you've got to get your shot twice a year. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. Oh, long COVID. Another industry. But we all know it was a scam. We all know it was a scam. Now, the clip I'm about to play for you guys, some people go, well, that was just staged. That was just a bunch of actors, a bunch of comedians who were doing that. No, it was a real politician. His name is Renaud Muselier. And he's a French physician and politician who's been serving as president of the Regional Council of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur since 2017. And he's been with a lot of different parties. He's done a lot of political things, but he is still a politician. And you know that when politicians come and speak to us at a podium, they always have to be, backed by other people who look so very supportive of them, whether it's other MPs or senators or office staff or people who work at the plant they're talking from or whatever. There's always a crowd of people behind. And that's what this is. This Dr. Renaud Muselier a few years ago during the COVID pandemic. Watch.
Mettez les masques. Bien. On peut y aller? Tout le monde est prêt? Bien, mesdames et messieurs.
You can see his name right there on the podium, Renaud Muselier, or whatever the hell pronunciation.
Le résultat de ce second tour a démenti tous les sondages et d'où jouer tous les pronostics. Ce soir, j'ai gagné et nous avons gagné.
If there's any part of this show that you want to show to one of your normie friends, then that would be it. What time would this be? Around the 58, 59 minute mark? If masks were so bloody important, Dr. Fauci may be investigated. That's what Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI down in the United States, is pushing for. This video is about 6 minutes. It's Tulsi talking about the Democrat elite.
You guys who watch me know that I use the word Democrat elite a lot. People ask me, who are these Democrat elite that you speak of? Yes, it's people like Joe Biden, people like Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer. But it's important to recognize that it is also unelected officials like Fauci, who has shown throughout his entire career serving under both Democrat and Republican administrations through his actions that he serves his own interests and the interests of big pharma and big government consistently over the interests of the American people. The insidious part about this is that he and others take these actions and abuse their power in the name of working for our best interests when in fact they are doing the exact opposite. For example, as you remember during COVID, Dr. Fauci demanded that we place blind faith in him and the government. They said, just trust us, just trust the science, that we are acting in the interest of your public health. But over time, we saw what it was really about. It was about control. It was about more money, huge amounts of money, our taxpayer dollars being put directly into the pockets of big pharma. They didn't care about the truth. In fact, they outwardly and very brazenly rejected science, rejected the truth, and just labeled their lies as science and the truth. Now we know Fauci has lied to Congress numerous times, including the lie that the National Institute of Health did not and does not perform or fund gain-of-function research. This is a serious one, and it's a crime that Democrats have imprisoned Republicans for, lying under oath before Congress. But here's the thing, is Democrats protect their friends who lie before Congress from ever being prosecuted and go after their opponents. We also know now that Fauci's team has been exposed through hearings yesterday and today. They worked behind the scenes to cover up the origins of the COVID outbreak. Fauci knew about it. He was CC'd on those emails, and he allowed it to happen and then lied to Congress about it. Fauci confirmed today that his quote-unquote guidance on ensuring that we all have 6 feet of social distancing between us wasn't actually backed up by any science. They just picked this random number out of there. I know if you were like me, when you're standing in the airport waiting to board a plane, they're saying 6 feet apart and then you're crammed together on that plane. It just makes no sense. And we can't forget Dr. Fauci's guidance was used in very serious ways to undermine our freedoms. He stopped us from freely worshiping in church or even outdoor services and drive-through services, while still allowing drive-through fast food restaurants to remain open, while still allowing bars, strip clubs, and liquor stores to remain open. Fauci's so-called guidance led to the censorship of our free speech. It led to doctors who knew that what he was doing was wrong. If they dared to speak up, to challenge his guidance, they were threatened with their medical license and therefore their livelihood being taken away. This violation of our fundamental rights and free speech will have long-lasting effects. Their demonization of people who questioned or challenged Dr. Fauci and his team's guidance will have long-lasting effects. We've seen it in self-censorship, people afraid to speak up for what they know is true and right. Now, coming out of all of this, the takeaway from Dr. Fauci and the Democrat elite is they can lie to the American people. They can take away our freedoms in their pursuit of power, because as long as their friends are in power, they can rest easy knowing that they're going to get away with it. So here's the bottom line. We cannot allow politicians and leaders who abuse their power to remain in power. Our ability to bring about this change is in our hands. We must hold them to account so this doesn't happen again. But the thing that we are working with Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH director, on with, as well as Secretary Kennedy, is looking at the gain of function research that, in the case of the Wuhan lab, as well as many of these other biolabs around the world, was actually U.S. funded and leads to this dangerous kind of research that, in many examples, has resulted in either a pandemic or some other major health crisis.
Well, let me ask you specifically, because we already know that EcoHealth Alliance was partnering with this Wuhan lab to do gain of function research.
That's right.
We just have never been able to have somebody say, it was that exact experiment that led to this COVID bug. But have we gotten there? What's the new thing that you're digging in on?
We are working on that with Jay Bhattacharya and look forward to being able to share that, hopefully very soon.
Okay.
That specific
link.
Correct, between the gain of function research and what we saw with COVID-19.
I mean, that would be extraordinary, because just so the audience knows, if that's true, if it was Peter Daszak's research with the Wuhan so-called bat lady that caused this pandemic, then we did fund it. Then Anthony Fauci helped fund the pandemic.
The thing that he denied over and over and over to Senator Rand Paul's questioning.
That's right, under oath.
Under oath, exactly. So is it any wonder that he sought a preemptive pardon for anything during a certain period of time by President Biden before he left office?
And then strong-armed and smeared people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, anybody who came out and said, I don't know if that's natural. This actually smacks of lab.
And the reason why this is so important is not just what happened in the past. It's because this gain of function research is happening in biolabs around the world. We have to end this gain of function research and provide the evidence that shows exactly why and how it's in our best interest, the American people's best interest, to bring about an end to it.
All of this information is coming out, and it looks like Fauci is, I'm not going to say he's going to pay. I can't say that yet, but he's definitely going to be questioned and investigated and maybe even arrested. Who knows? But there's a big can of worms that's open down there in the United States, and all of this new information has come out. That was a conspiracy theory just a couple of years ago. So let me ask you this. Why is it that your normie friends, my normie friends, they can't see this? They're still, for some reason, going along with that old narrative, which has changed, I don't know, a dozen times in the last few years. Well, you know, the masks weren't meant to protect you. They were to protect other people. The same with the vaccine. Oh, by the way, it's not 95% effective anymore. Now it's only 50%, but it's better than nothing. And by the way, it was never meant to keep you from getting COVID. It was meant to stop you from going to the hospital. What? No, it wasn't. That's not what they were saying before. Oh, yes, it was. And then scrubbing all that information off the internet. I remember for myself when I saw things on the internet, this was in the very, very beginning of all this, I would see that and go, oh, well, that's crazy. I wouldn't think to take a screenshot because I never would have ever thought that there would be censorship. And then 2 days later, when you need that information, you go back to look for it and it's no longer there. You're on the same page you were on, but that information is gone. You can't find it anywhere. What? Well, it's for your safety. Isn't that interesting? Let's not also forget about all the ridiculousness that's going on in the world. That people would start putting two and two together, right? Like it's all one big crazy narrative being controlled from behind the scenes by a bunch of crazy billionaires. Look at what they're doing in the UK.
Cover police officers taking to the streets in Surrey as part of a new operation trying to stop people catcalling and harassing female runners.
We get honked at, the staring, the hanging out of the window just to look at us, and it's so prevalent.
And police teams are ready to intervene the moment the officers are beeped at, followed or shouted at, pulling people over.
Those kind of behaviours may not be criminal offences in themselves, but they still need to be addressed. And of course, the people that are likely to commit those kind of behaviours, they may then go on to commit more serious offences.
It's enough to make you wonder what would happen if some police officers are assigned to this detail and they got no catcalls whatsoever. Would they be giving interviews about how happy they are about the fact that no one in the entire city during their 8-hour shift bothered to compliment them? Is that the conversation that would take place back at the station? It seems doubtful, but we can't say. We're supposed to pretend that those women didn't want to be catcalled. We're supposed to pretend that they wouldn't have been horrifically embarrassed and offended if they weren't catcalled at all. We're supposed to pretend that. In any event, in the video, they admit that catcalling isn't even criminal, which raises the obvious question of why the police are doing this. They explain that in truth, they're just trying to wag their finger at people who catcall because catcalling is like a gateway drug to more criminal activity. Apparently, one minute you're telling a woman she looks pretty, the next minute you're robbing a bank and shooting the bank teller. I mean, it happens all the time. It happens all the time.
Catcalling is a gateway drug. With this ridiculousness. Like, how is it that people aren't going, hey, now? Or is it enough for them to go, it's just so stupid, it's all going to end, la, 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 la. And they put their hands over their ears and they just don't pay attention because somebody else will take care of it. Or it can't continue. Now, I know our friend Wayne Peters says that this kind of insanity is unsustainable. And he may be right. But let's be honest, this insanity has been sustainable and it keeps getting worse. It's escalating. When you look up into the sky, some mornings, not every morning, but when you look up into the sky and you see this perfect checkerboard pattern of trails, it's like, well, that's not natural. I don't recall that when I was a kid. What are they doing? What are they spraying? Oh, no. Now, even some people from our side of things say that's a bridge too far. That's not real. It's not, there's no chemtrail. Well, then what is it? What are they doing? Considering the fact that there is a section on the federal government website in Canada, which is all about weather manipulation. You can look that up too. It's there. They talk about it. It's not a secret. So why are people so when you bring it up? Our friend Lisa Robinson is a counselor in Pickering, Ontario, and she brought it up in council a couple of years ago. And, well...
Hey guys, Councillor Lisa Robinson here. In May of 2023, I stood in our council chamber not to peddle conspiracy, but to demand transparency. Planes streaked across our skies, laying grid patterns and artificial cloud cover. And I asked, what is being sprayed? I requested answers, like the ingredients, the frequency, the volume, safety data, especially for our insects, our animals, our water and food supply, and the health of all who live here. Councillor Brenner originally seconded the motion, but then pulled back at the last minute. Why? Because as he put it, if it's for climate change, he doesn't care what they're spraying over our land. Right there, by council voting against asking the questions to our federal governments, they're saying that they will turn a blind eye to anything harmful as long as it seems science-y. Now, in Moonbeam, Ontario, their mayor, Luke Leonard, didn't blink. He stood up for his people and he passed a resolution ending aerial glyphosate spraying. His wife's own serious health challenges linked to environmental exposure was part of the reason that drove him to fight for the truth and for public safety. Meanwhile, in the United States, states like Florida are moving to criminalize geoengineering and weather modification. Under proposed laws, those caught releasing chemicals into the air after climate patterns could face third-degree felony charges, up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $100,000. If our skies are clear and the substances are safe, then show us the proof. But if there's a risk, then stop spraying. And here's my commitment to you. This September, I will be bringing forward a new notice of motion demanding that the federal government disclose exactly what ingredients are being sprayed over Durham region, along with how often, in what quantity, and with what health testing is in place. And I hope this time my fellow councillors will have the courage to second the motion so that at the very least, we can have a debate. Because that's how democracy is supposed to work. And that's what every Canadian deserves.
It's a conspiracy theory, don't you understand? You've got so many people out there who would yell and scream conspiracy theory rather than have a discussion, even if they don't know what they're talking about. You know, last week on the extension on shadowdavis.com, and by the way, for anybody who is having trouble getting out of the website tonight, I have changed nothing on the website. Nothing. So you shouldn't be having a problem. What I would suggest is with browser updates and whatnot, clear your cache, clear your history, and then try again. You should be okay. So we ran this piece called Candles in the Dark by a guy who's been arguing for anarchy for his entire life. And he had so many great ways of getting to people who otherwise wouldn't pay attention. And that's what we all need to do. We need to find a way to have conversations with these people because we've got the data. We've got the information. We've got the statistics. We've got the proof. You know, they say, bring the receipts, bring the evidence. I got it right here. La, 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 la. Conspiracy theory. They don't want to hear it. But the more people we can bring into our tent, wake up, make them understand, the better chance we're going to have of winning going forward. How many people are under the spell of climate change still? For goodness sakes, it's outrageous. I saw a guy talking about it at the gas station the other day. Well, you know, all this crazy weather, it's because of climate. I looked at him and I said, shut up. Seriously, this stranger, I had no idea who this guy was. I said, then prove it. Tell me. Well, the oceans are rising. Prove it. What's causing it? Well, I said, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't. And that was actually in one of those little gas kiosks, like one of those little ones. That was a one person at a time thing during the COVID response. Remember that? Well, I was standing right next to this guy. We're like right close. He was exasperated, but I was as well. It was last week sometime. So speaking of climate change, there's a new study that says the threat of man-made global warming is greatly exaggerated. Greatly exaggerated. Greatly. Actually, this isn't so new. It's been out for a while. How come nobody knows about it? Peer-reviewed climate change study by the non-governmental International Panel on Climate Change finds the threat of man-made global warming to be not only greatly exaggerated, but so small as to be embedded within the background variability of the natural climate system and not dangerous. Not dangerous. Lastly, from the Malaysian Reserve, I try to go around the world and find different stories for you guys all the time. The founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, has been cleared of misconduct by a probe by the World Economic Forum. Remember those old memes? That's like of Justin Trudeau talking to himself and say, you're innocent. I find you innocent. An investigation conducted by the World Economic Forum's board on Friday cleared the body's founder, Klaus Schwab, and his wife of wrongdoing after a probe into whistleblower complaints. Following a thorough review of all facts, the board has concluded that there is no evidence of material wrongdoing against Mr. Schwab. In April, the Wall Street Journal reported that an anonymous letter sent to the prestigious institution's board of directors accused Schwab and his wife, Hildy, of mixing their personal affairs with forum resources without proper oversight. Spokesperson for Schwab had immediately denied all of these accusations, but the 87-year-old said he would step down as head of World Economic Forum. I wonder if he's going to step back up now that he's been cleared in this investigation by the World Economic Forum. Wouldn't you think that, just to look good for optics, you'd bring in some neutral outside third party? No, we'll do it ourselves. Don't worry about it. Why can't we talk about it? Why can't we talk about it? That is what we're going to watch tonight on the extension on shadowdavis.com. Quickly, for the All Access Nighthawks, we'll see you there in just a couple of minutes. And please consider joining. It's interesting. I get all of these people all the time asking to come on my show and ask for money, whether it's a book they're selling or whatever. And I don't mind doing that. I really don't, because I understand that everybody needs to support themselves. But there are times where I have to think of myself and this show before anybody else. And when you buy a membership at shadowdavis.com, and that store is going to be open soon, the Shadow Store, I call it, all kinds of merch in there available in a few days. I was working on it this past weekend. Not as easy as it sounds. I'm not going to go into detail. But that is what keeps this show going. Notice there are no sponsorships left on this show. So it's you and me, man. And if you choose to buy a membership, that's great. I thank you very much. It doesn't mean you can tell me what to talk about. It means you get the extra content we provide every single night. You don't have to watch it at night. You don't have to watch it live. You can always go and watch it whenever you want. You will have access to the website, shadowdavis.com, 24/7 going forward. All right? And you'll get special deals in the Shadow Store as well, open in the next few days. But that is how this show keeps going. I understand there's some people out there that can't afford it, and I totally understand that, but it's not really very expensive. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that it's probably much cheaper than your last trip to the store to buy a few things. It's much cheaper than a pack of smokes, certainly cheaper than a bottle of rye, and it's definitely cheaper than giving money to any large cable company out there and giving money to people who hate you. Because when you spend money on cable, you're actually giving money to Bell and to Rogers and these big corporations who are trying to censor you. So stop supporting people who hate you and start supporting people who have been here with you for 5 years. It doesn't have to be me or this show. It can be your favorite, whatever it is. It's time to step up, folks. Become a member. If you want to make a donation, you can do that too. shadowdavis.com. shadowdavis@gmail.com. You can do e-transfers if you want to. All right. It's time to start thinking about support, considering that everything I do every day, I don't normally ask for that. Checking up on Elections Canada. The polls don't close for another 10 minutes in Battle River Crowfoot, so we're not going to have any results for you for at least 10 minutes, and I would suggest it's going to be another hour and 10 minutes before we get anything else. But I am predicting a Poilievre victory in this riding. And that's it for the show tonight. We'll begin with the extension in just a couple of minutes. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.